Imagine a world where second chances are rare, yet, for one woman, it's about to become a reality, but the past has a way of catching up. And tonight, a ghost from her past threatens everything. Before we get into this story, share in the comments what you think about second chances. 12-year-old Ava Coleman dropped from the final rope wall, her boots hitting the ground with military precision while stopwatches clicked around her. Behind the safety barriers, General Anthony Burke stood frozen in disbelief, watching a small girl from Stonebridge, Colorado, complete the Special Forces qualifying course that had broken seasoned soldiers just hours earlier. Impossible, he had declared 3 weeks ago when this Mehadi's daughter first stepped onto his base. No civilian child could handle real combat training, let alone shatter records that had stood for decades. Now with his career reputation and a full military academy scholarship riding on her performance, Ava studied her breathing and prepared for the final challenge that would prove extraordinary capabilities could emerge from the most unexpected places when nurtured by people who believed in potential over prejudice. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 months earlier, autumn had settled over Stonebridge like a warm blanket, bringing with it the familiar weight of another struggling season for the small Colorado mountain town. The aspen trees lining Highway 285 blazed gold and orange against the granite peaks, creating a beautiful facade that couldn't hide the economic hardship gripping the community. Empty storefronts dotted Main Street like missing teeth, their dusty windows reflecting dreams that had slowly faded along with the mining jobs that once sustained the region. Ava pressed her face against the cool glass of Coleman Auto Repair, watching sparse traffic crawl through town with the sluggish pace of a place that had forgotten how to hurry. At 12, she possessed an unusual stillness for someone her age. A quality born from learning early to observe rather than demand attention in a household where every conversation seemed to revolve around overdue bills, parts, suppliers, and the constant struggle to keep their small garage operating. Her father, Kevin Coleman, hunched over the open hood of a rusted pickup truck, his shoulders curved inward under the weight of responsibility that had accumulated over 2 decades of working twice as hard for half as much. At 41, he had the weathered appearance of someone who understood that hope was a luxury his family couldn't afford. But determination was free and available in unlimited quantities. The garage had been his father's dream before economic reality transformed it into a daily test of survival. "Ava, honey, could you help your mother with the paperwork?" Kevin called from beneath the hood, his voice carrying the careful cheerfulness adults used when shielding children from problems too complex for young minds to solve. Chris Peterson's insurance claim came back short again, and we need to figure out what we can manage with the settlement they offered. In the cramped office behind the service bay, Donna Coleman sorted through invoices with the methodical precision of someone accustomed to performing miracles with insufficient resources. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her scribs bore the honest stains of someone who worked double shifts at Rocky Mountain Regional Hospital while helping manage the family business during her off hours. The combination of nursing and bookkeeping provided just enough income to prevent complete financial collapse. "How was school today, sweetheart?" she asked as Ava joined her at the desk cluttered with medical bills and automotive receipts. The question carried layers beyond maternal interest, with Austin's special education needs requiring expensive therapy sessions. Ava's academic and emotional well-being sometimes got lost in the shuffle of crisis management that defined their daily existence. "Fine," Ava replied, which was her standard response to most questions about school. In truth, Stonebridge Elementary had become increasingly challenging as budget cuts eliminated programs and left overcrowded classrooms with frustrated teachers struggling to meet diverse student needs. Ava had learned to be virtually invisible, completing assignments competently, but never drawing attention to herself or her family circumstances. The reality was that being the daughter of a struggling mechanic in a small town carried its own particular social stigma. While classmates discussed family vacations and new clothes, Ava had mastered the art of deflecting questions about her own situation. She wore her limited wardrobe with quiet dignity, maintaining the appearance that everything was manageable, even when it clearly wasn't. "Mrs. Sanders mentioned that Pastor Edwards is starting some kind of youth program at the community center." Donna continued, organizing bills by due date with mathematical precision. "Something about physical fitness and building confidence might be good for you to get involved with other children your age." Ava nodded while filing insurance forms that represented weeks of careful negotiation with companies that seemed designed to avoid paying legitimate claims. She had overheard enough adult conversations to understand that youth programs in Stonebridge were often thinly disguised charity efforts, well-meaning attempts to provide structure for children whose families couldn't afford organized activities. The idea of being perceived as someone who needed help made her stomach tighten with embarrassment, even though she recognized the genuine kindness behind such offers. From the garage came the sound of Austin's laughter, a bright note that momentarily lifted the subdued atmosphere of the office. At 9 years old, he possessed an infectious joy that seemed immune to the financial pressures weighing heavily on the rest of the family. His learning disabilities had been diagnosed the previous year, requiring specialized therapy sessions that consumed a significant portion of their already strained budget. But his spirit remained unbroken by circumstances he was too young to fully comprehend. "Ava, come see what I built," he called out, his voice bubbling with excitement that characterized most of his interactions with the world. She found him in the corner of the garage where Kevin allowed him to play with discarded auto parts and cardboard boxes during after-school hours. His architectural creations were surprisingly sophisticated, displaying an intuitive understanding of mechanical principles that impressed adults who took time to examine his work. "That's amazing, Austin," she said, genuinely admiring the complex structure he had constructed from alternators, fan belts, and shipping materials. "Is it a fortress?" "It's an obstacle course," he replied matter-of-factly, pointing to carefully arranged components that formed what looked like training stations, like the ones on TV where soldiers practice getting really strong and fast. "Did you know some people can climb ropes and jump over walls and crawl under things really quickly? That's like from here to the post office and back again in just a few minutes." Ava studied his creation with new interest, noting the attention to detail he had invested in recreating what was essentially a miniature version of military training facilities. Austin had always been fascinated by activities requiring coordination and physical skill, perhaps because his learning challenges made such achievements feel particularly valuable. "Where did you learn about obstacle courses?" she asked, settling onto a crate beside his workspace. "Pastor Edward showed me a book about it when I was at the community center yesterday. He said they have real ones where people learn to be really strong and fast with their bodies. He said it takes practice and determination, but some people are naturally good at moving and thinking at the same time." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Gertrude Sanders, their elderly neighbor who had become something of a surrogate grandmother to both children. At 75, she possessed the kind of practical wisdom that came from surviving the Great Depression and raising 4 children on a teacher's salary. Her presence in their lives had been a blessing that the Colemans had learned to accept gracefully, understanding that her help came from genuine affection rather than pity. "Good afternoon, you two," she said, easing her arthritic frame onto a folding chair with careful deliberation. "Austin, I see you've been busy with your construction projects again. That's quite an impressive setup you've created there. It's an obstacle course." "Mrs. Sanders," Austin explained eagerly, "Pastor Edwards told me about how people can climb and jump and crawl really fast if they practice enough and have good coordination." Mrs. Sanders examined Austin's creation more closely, her weathered hands tracing the pathways he had designed through the makeshift training stations. "Well, my late husband Harold was quite the athlete in his day. Won several track and field competitions before the war, and even afterward, he could still outrun men half his age." Ava found herself leaning forward with unexpected curiosity. What made him so good at it? Natural ability mostly, but also patience and the willingness to practice the same movements over and over until they became automatic. Harold used to say that good athletes weren't really competing against other people. They were competing against their own limitations, trying to discover what their bodies could accomplish when their mind stopped telling them what was impossible. She paused, studying Ava with the penetrating gaze that elderly people sometimes used when they sensed something significant beneath ordinary conversation. "Why do you ask, honey? You thinking about taking up athletics?" The question caught Ava off guard. She hadn't been thinking about athletics at all. But something about Mrs. Sanders' description of physical training as mental discipline resonated with her in ways she couldn't immediately articulate. The idea of activities that rewarded careful observation and methodical improvement appealed to someone who had spent most of her life learning to notice details others overlooked. "I don't know," she replied honestly. "It sounds like it might be interesting." "Well, as it happens, Pastor Edwards mentioned that the youth program he's organizing is going to include some basic fitness training. Nothing dangerous, mind you, just obstacle courses and team exercises to start with. But he's bringing in someone who really knows what they're talking about. Military fellow who's supposed to be quite accomplished." Before Ava could respond, the conversation was interrupted by the sound of customers entering the garage. Kevin's voice carried from the service bay as he greeted newcomers with enthusiastic warmth reserved for anyone willing to spend money at Coleman Auto Repair. Through the office window, they could see him directing a family toward the waiting area, his demeanor brightening considerably at the prospect of actual business. "I should go help, Dad," Ava said, rising from the crate with automatic responsibility that characterized most of her responses to family needs. But as she moved toward the service bay, her mind remained occupied with Mrs. Sanders' description of athletic training as a discipline that rewarded qualities she had been developing unconsciously for years. The family in the waiting area turned out to be tourists passing through on their way to ski resorts near Vail, and their presence brought temporary energy to the garage that had been missing for weeks. Ava found herself moving between the office and service bay with practice efficiency, helping with paperwork and customer service while listening to animated conversations about mountain roads and winter sports. It wasn't until after they had left, leaving behind a payment that would cover groceries for the next week, that she realized how much their brief presence had lifted everyone's spirits. Even Austin seemed more animated as he continued working on his cardboard obstacle course, adding new details and explaining the function of each component to anyone willing to listen. "You know," Kevin said as they began closing procedures for the evening, "Pastor Edwards stopped by earlier while you were at school. He specifically asked about you, said he thought you might benefit from the new youth program they're starting." Ava looked up from the invoice she was filing, suddenly alert to the possibility that her afternoon conversation with Mrs. Sanders hadn't been entirely coincidental. What kind of program? Community service, leadership development, some recreational activities, but he mentioned they're going to have some unique opportunities, including instruction from a military specialist who's volunteering his time. Might be worth checking out, especially since it doesn't cost anything. The suggestion hung in the air like an invitation to something that might be either wonderful or embarrassing depending on how it was structured and who else participated. Ava had learned to be cautious about opportunities that seemed too good to be true, understanding that charity often came disguised as chance when you were the family that needed help most. But as she finished her closing duties and helped Austin pack up his elaborate cardboard construction, she found herself thinking about Mrs. Sanders' description of athletic training as a discipline that rewarded patience, observation, and the ability to overcome mental limitations through physical practice. Those were qualities she had been developing out of necessity rather than choice. Survival skills that had emerged from years of careful adaptation to circumstances beyond her control. Perhaps it was time to discover whether those skills might have applications beyond simply getting by unnoticed in a world that seemed designed for people with more resources than her family possessed. Perhaps there were ways to transform survival into achievement, ways to channel the determination she had cultivated into something that could make a real difference in their lives. As Stonebridge settled into its evening routine of porch lights and television screens glowing behind curtained windows, Ava Coleman made a decision that would change everything about her understanding of herself and her place in the world. Tomorrow, she would ask Pastor Edwards about the youth program and a military specialist who was going to teach physical training to children who might never have imagined they possessed the potential for excellence. She had no way of knowing that this decision would eventually lead to a confrontation with one of the most arrogant military officers in Colorado. A challenge that would capture regional attention and a demonstration of capability that would prove once and for all that extraordinary abilities could emerge from the most ordinary circumstances when they were nurtured by people who understood the true meaning of potential. The story that would make headlines across the state was about to begin with a 12-year-old girl's curiosity about whether she might be good at something that required the exact qualities she had been developing in silence for years. All it would take was the courage to find out what she was really capable of when someone finally gave her the chance to discover her own exceptional gifts. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Wednesday arrived crisp and clear with frost painting intricate patterns on the windows of Coleman Auto Repair and the Rocky Mountains standing sharp against a cloudless sky. Ava walked the 6 blocks to Sacred Heart Community Center, carrying the permission slip that Donna had signed after considerable family discussion the night before. Their conversation had involved careful questions about supervision, liability, and whether accepting help from the church community would create obligations they couldn't meet. The community center occupied a converted warehouse on the edge of Stonebrig's modest downtown district. Its brick exterior weathered but solid, Pastor Craig Edwards had transformed the cavernous interior into a multi-purpose space serving everything from wedding receptions to emergency shelter during blizzards. Today, exercise mats had been arranged across the polished concrete floor while someone had set up what appeared to be basic training equipment near a small stage. Ava paused at the entrance, uncertain about whether she belonged in a group activity that might reveal how different her family's circumstances were from those of her peers. Through the glass doors, she could see other children arriving, most accompanied by parents she recognized from school events, but had never really spoken to beyond polite greetings. The social dynamics of small-town life meant everyone knew everyone else's business, but actual relationships often developed along economic lines rarely discussed openly. Ava Coleman, right on time, Pastor Edwards said as she entered, his warm smile immediately putting her at ease. At 55, he possessed genuine kindness that made people feel valued regardless of their circumstances. His ministry had always focused on practical assistance rather than judgment, providing resources without the condescending attitude that sometimes accompanied charitable efforts. "Thank you for inviting me, Pastor Edwards. My parents wanted me to ask about what's expected of participants. Nothing more than showing up with an open mind and willingness to try new things." We're fortunate to have Sergeant First Class Eric Thompson volunteering his time with us. He's recently retired from active duty and has agreed to teach basic fitness and teamwork principles to any young people interested in developing physical confidence. Across the room, a man in his mid-40s arranged equipment with methodical precision that characterized people accustomed to handling potentially dangerous items with absolute safety. Sergeant Thompson had the lean build of someone who had maintained military fitness standards long past required service, but his demeanor suggested approachability rather than intimidation. His graying hair was cut in a style that balanced military regulation with civilian casualness. "Kids, gather around and let's get started," he called out in a voice that carried authority without aggression. "I'm Eric Thompson, and I'm here to teach you about something most people think is all about muscles and speed, but is really about developing mental toughness and problem-solving skills that will serve you well whatever you choose to do with your lives." 14 children ranging in age from 8 to 15 had assembled for the program, representing a cross-section of Stonebriggs youth that included both those who needed structure and those whose parents simply thought the skills might prove valuable. Ava found herself positioned between a boy named Connor who helped at his family's hardware store and a girl named Emma, whose father managed the largest ranch in the county. Before we talk about obstacle courses or team challenges or any of the exciting activities, we need to understand what physical training really accomplishes, Sergeant Thompson continued, moving to the front of the group with relaxed confidence. It's the ability to perform complex tasks efficiently under pressure. That means controlling your breathing, your balance, your daishonim, even your fear responses. These are skills that will help you whether you're taking tests, handling emergencies, or dealing with any situation where performance matters under stress. He gestured toward equipment arranged on nearby tables, handling each piece with casual competence of someone for whom such tools were instruments rather than objects of fascination. "This is how we'll start learning with equipment that's challenging but safe, designed to teach proper techniques. Everyone will learn safety protocols first, then basic movement patterns, then coordination and problem-solving techniques. Only after you've mastered those fundamentals will we progress to more complex challenges." Ava listened with growing interest as he explained the mental aspects of physical training, particularly his emphasis on developing what he called tactical thinking, the ability to assess situations quickly, formulate plans under pressure, and execute solutions efficiently, even when circumstances changed unexpectedly. The concept reminded her of approaches she used for difficult situations at home or school, breaking them down into manageable steps and executing each component with careful attention to detail. "Miss Coleman, you seem particularly engaged by this discussion," Sergeant Thompson observed, noticing her focused attention. "Have you had any experience with organized fitness activities?" "No, sir, but my neighbor, Mrs. Sanders, told me about her husband, who was supposed to be very good at athletics. She said he could do things that other people couldn't because he understood how to use his mind and body together." That's an excellent description of advanced physical training. The best athletes develop an almost intuitive coordination between mental planning and physical execution. It takes dedication to develop that level of integration, but some people have natural aptitude that accelerates the learning process. He spent the next hour covering safety protocols with thoroughness that eliminated any possibility of injury through carelessness or misunderstanding. Every aspect of using training equipment was broken down into specific steps that eliminated ambiguity about proper procedures. Ava found herself absorbing the information with unusual ease, as if the systematic approach to safety and efficiency aligned naturally with her existing tendencies toward careful observation and methodical execution. When they moved to hands-on instruction with basic obstacle course elements, she discovered that the physical requirements felt surprisingly manageable. Low crawls under horizontal bars required the kind of patience and precision she had always found comforting. Balance beams demanded careful attention to body position and movement control that seemed to emerge from instinct rather than instruction. "Very good, Ava," Sergeant Thompson said as he observed her navigate a sequence of coordination challenges. "You've got natural spatial awareness, and your movement patterns are already efficient. Those are qualities that can't really be taught through instruction alone. They have to develop from within." The compliment made her feel both proud and slightly self-conscious, as if she was receiving recognition for something she hadn't realized she was doing well. Around her, other participants struggled with various aspects of the activities. Some had difficulty maintaining balance during dynamic movements, while others fought the urge to rush through exercises that required careful timing and coordination. "Can you explain what you're thinking about when you're moving through these challenges?" Sergeant Thompson asked after she had completed several exercises with impressive consistency. Ava considered the question carefully, trying to articulate something that felt more intuitive than analytical. "I'm trying to make everything as smooth as possible, not just my movements, but my breathing and thinking, too, like I'm listening to my body tell me what works best." Sergeant Thompson nodded with obvious approval. That's remarkably sophisticated thinking for someone just learning these concepts. The ability to achieve that kind of mind-body coordination is what separates competent athletes from exceptional ones. Most people spend months trying to develop what you seem to understand instinctively. As the session concluded and equipment was carefully stored according to safety protocols, Ava found herself reluctant to leave the environment where she had experienced her first taste of activities that seemed to reward qualities she possessed naturally. The other participants chattered excitedly about the afternoon's instruction, but she remained quiet, processing the unexpected discovery that there might be something she could genuinely excel at. "Ava, could I speak with you for a moment before you go?" Pastor Edwards asked as the group began dispersing. She approached his desk near the stage where he was organizing paperwork related to the youth program. "Sergeant Thompson mentioned that you showed unusual aptitude for the coordination and problem-solving aspects of physical training. He wanted me to ask if he'd be interested in additional instruction beyond what we can offer in the group setting." The suggestion caught her off guard. "What kind of additional instruction?" "He volunteers at Fort Red Hawk on weekends working with young people who show potential for advanced fitness training. It wouldn't cost your family anything, and he thinks you might benefit from more challenging activities if you're genuinely interested in developing these abilities." Ava felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension at the possibility of individual attention from someone who clearly understood what he was discussing. The opportunity represented exactly the kind of specialized instruction that families like hers rarely accessed. But it also meant acknowledging that she was someone who needed opportunities rather than someone who could manage independently. "Could I think about it and let you know?" "Of course. Take all the time you need. This is supposed to be an opportunity, not an obligation." The walk home gave her plenty of time to consider what had happened that afternoon and what it might mean for her future. The physical act of moving through obstacle courses had felt natural in ways that surprised her. But more significant was the mental state that proper training techniques seemed to require. The focused calmness that Sergeant Thompson described as essential for efficiency was something she had been developing unconsciously for years as a coping mechanism for family stress and social uncertainty. She arrived at Coleman Auto Repair to find the afternoon shift in full swing, with Kevin working under the hood of a delivery truck, while Donna managed paperwork for a group of construction workers who had brought several vehicles for routine maintenance. The familiar sounds and smells of the garage felt comforting after an afternoon of new experiences and possibilities that were still too fresh to fully comprehend. "How did it go at the community center?" Donna asked during a brief lull in customer demands. "Good, really good actually. The instructor said I might have natural ability for the coordination and problem-solving parts." Kevin looked up from his work with interest. "Coordination and problem-solving? I thought you were going to learn about fitness." "That too. But Sergeant Thompson says physical training is mostly about learning to think clearly under pressure and coordinate your mind and body to solve problems efficiently. He thinks I might be good at it." Before either parent could respond, Austin emerged from his corner workspace, where he had been expanding his cardboard obstacle course with additional components avenged from the recycling bin. His learning disabilities required extra time and effort for tasks that came easily to other children, but he had developed remarkable persistence in pursuit of goals that mattered to him. "Did you get to do obstacle courses today?" he asked with enthusiasm that characterized his approach to most discussions about physical activities. "Some basic ones. First, we had to learn safety rules and proper movement techniques and breathing patterns. But Sergeant Thompson says some people have natural talent for sensing how their bodies move through space and solving problems while they're moving." That sounds like what Mrs. Sanders said about her husband being able to run faster and jump higher because he could sense things about his body that other people missed. The parallel between Mrs. Sanders' description and Sergeant Thompson's instruction hadn't occurred to Ava until Austin mentioned it. But she realized that both had emphasized the importance of developing sensitivity to physical and mental factors that influenced performance. Perhaps her tendency to notice details that others overlooked was more valuable than she had realized. That evening, as Stonebridge settled into its familiar rhythm of family dinners and homework sessions, Ava found herself thinking about the possibility of individual instruction at the military base. The opportunity represented a chance to explore abilities that might distinguish her from her peers in positive rather than economic ways. For the first time in her life, she had encountered activities where careful observation and methodical approach were assets rather than simply survival strategies. The decision about whether to pursue advanced training would require family discussion, but she was beginning to understand that this might be more than just recreational activity. If she truly possessed natural aptitude for physical training and tactical thinking, developing those skills could lead to opportunities currently unimaginable for someone from her background and circumstances. As she helped close the garage and prepare for another day of carefully managed economic survival, Ava Coleman began to dream about the possibility that her greatest strengths might finally have found their proper application. The girl who had learned to be invisible was about to discover that sometimes the most powerful people were those who knew how to move with purpose while others stood still. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and decisions, but tonight she allowed herself to believe that she might be at the beginning of something extraordinary. Saturday brought unseasonably warm weather to the Colorado Rockies with brilliant sunshine that made the snow-capped peaks gleam like polished silver against the deep blue sky. Ava sat in the passenger seat of Pastor Edward's pickup truck as they wound through mountain highways toward Fort Red Hawk, her stomach tight with nervous anticipation about what lay ahead. The decision to accept Sergeant Thompson's offer had been easier than expected once Kevin and Donna understood that the opportunity came without financial obligation or hidden expectations. Fort Red Hawk occupied a natural plateau in the mountains about 45 minutes outside Stone Bridge. Its facilities designed to accommodate everything from basic training to advanced special operations instruction. The main complex was an impressive collection of modern buildings that housed administrative offices, classrooms, and equipment storage, while outdoor training areas stretched across carefully maintained fields that disappeared into forested hillsides. "Remember, this is just an assessment session," Pastor Edwards said as they approached the security checkpoint. "Sergeant Thompson wants to evaluate what you're capable of before making any recommendations about ongoing training. No pressure to be perfect right away." Ann nodded, though she felt the familiar weight of family hopes that seemed to accompany any opportunity that might lead to positive changes in their circumstances. The Coleman family had learned to approach good fortune with cautious optimism, understanding that disappointment hurt worse when you allowed yourself to believe too completely in possibilities that might not materialize. Security procedures at the main gate introduced them to military protocol that felt simultaneously impressive and intimidating. Guards examined their credentials with professional courtesy but obvious vigilance, creating an atmosphere where civilian assumptions about access and authority no longer applied. Everything about Fort Red Hawk conveyed the message that this was a serious place where serious people accomplished difficult tasks through discipline and dedication. Sergeant Thompson met them at the visitor center dressed in civilian clothes that somehow still conveyed military bearing. His greeting was warm but professional, suggesting someone who understood the significance of what they were attempting without making it feel overwhelming for a 12-year-old still discovering her own capabilities. "Good to see you again, Ava. Ready to find out what you can really accomplish when we provide military-level instruction and proper facilities?" "Yes, sir. I've been thinking about what you said about tactical thinking and trying to practice that at home." "Excellent. Today, we'll start with baseline assessments to establish your current abilities. Then progress through increasingly demanding exercises that will test different aspects of your physical and mental development. Safety remains our top priority, but I'm hoping we can also challenge you in ways that reveal your true potential." The indoor training facilities exceeded anything Ava had experienced during community center sessions. Obstacle courses that extended beyond visual limits, equipment that measured performance with scientific precision, and instruction areas designed by personnel whose credentials included combat experience and Olympic-level coaching. The scale and sophistication emphasized that military training represented an entirely different level of commitment and capability from recreational fitness. Her first assessment involved navigating obstacle courses at distances from 50 to 200 yards using military equipment she had never encountered before. The unfamiliar apparatus added complexity that would have challenged experienced trainees, but her fundamental skills transferred smoothly to the different platforms and requirements. "Impressive adaptation," observed Captain Kyle Stewart, a veteran instructor whose assessment would significantly influence decisions about her future training opportunities. "Most civilian participants require extensive familiarization when transitioning to military equipment, but you're maintaining efficiency across multiple challenge types." The initial evaluation revealed capabilities that exceeded expectations of instructors who had reviewed her documentation before the session began. Her times on obstacle courses would have been competitive in military training competitions, while her problem-solving scores demonstrated analytical thinking that typically required months of specialized instruction to develop. "Ava, I want you to meet someone," Sergeant Thompson said as they prepared for the afternoon assessment phase. "Colonel Susan Bailey commands this facility, and she's expressed interest in observing our most promising participants." The introduction to Colonel Bailey would prove pivotal in transforming Eka's military assessment from routine evaluation into something approaching discovery. At 52, the colonel commanded respect through 2 decades of service that included combat deployments and senior leadership positions throughout the Army. Her presence at the assessment reflected high-level interest in training programs that have produced several Olympic athletes and special operations personnel. But Colonel Bailey also possessed wisdom that had developed over years of identifying genuine talent among enthusiastic amateurs. Her approach to civilian participants reflected understanding that exceptional ability could emerge from unexpected backgrounds when properly recognized and nurtured. Sergeant Thompson tells me you're our most promising participant, she said upon meeting Ava, her tone carrying professional interest rather than condescension. What draws you to military-style training? I think I like activities that require using your mind and body together to solve problems efficiently. Ma'am, Sergeant Thompson says that's what tactical thinking really means. Excellent answer. Military training is fundamentally about developing the ability to perform complex tasks under pressure while maintaining clear thinking and precise execution. Most people assume it's about physical strength, but the mental components are actually more important. Colonel Bailey positioned herself where she could observe the afternoon assessments, which would include more demanding challenges designed to reveal potential beyond basic competency. Advanced obstacle courses, tactical decision-making exercises, and stress tolerance tests that simulated conditions approaching real military training environments. Today, we'll evaluate your adaptability under changing conditions, Sergeant Thompson explained as they approached equipment configured for dynamic challenges. Military operations rarely proceed according to plan, so developing the ability to adjust strategies while maintaining performance becomes crucial for success. The afternoon assessment pushed her abilities toward their current limits, requiring perfect execution of fundamentals while adapting to environmental factors that changed throughout each exercise. Equipment configurations shifted between attempts. Weather conditions varied from sunny to artificially generated fog, and time pressures demanded constant calibration of approach and technique. Her performance exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. The mental discipline she had been developing transferred smoothly to multi-stage challenges, allowing her to maintain efficiency even when external circumstances changed significantly. Each obstacle course completion revealed new aspects of her capabilities, particularly her ability to analyze problems quickly and implement solutions under time pressure. Remarkable stress adaptation, Captain Stewart noted as they reviewed her results. You're maintaining performance standards under conditions that would challenge experienced military trainees. Most people lose efficiency dramatically when variables change rapidly, but you're actually improving as complexity increases. As the session concluded and equipment was secured according to military standards that exceeded civilian requirements, Colonel Bailey approached Sergeant Thompson for a conversation that Ava could only partially overhear. She caught fragments about, quote, exceptional potential and accelerated development track that suggested her performance had made a strong impression on someone whose opinion carried official weight. Ava, Colonel Bailey said as they prepared to leave, I'll be submitting a very positive evaluation to Regional Command. Based on what I observed today, I believe you have genuine potential for advanced military training programs that could lead to significant opportunities. The drive back to Stonebridge gave her time to process the day's developments and their implications for her future. The transition from civilian assessment to military evaluation represented a threshold that felt both exciting and overwhelming, opening possibilities that had seemed unimaginable just months earlier. How do you feel about the military interest in your abilities? Pastor Edwards asked as they descended from the mountains toward Stonebridge. Proud, but also nervous about what comes next. Everything keeps getting more serious and more complicated than I expected. That's natural when you're discovering capabilities that create opportunities you hadn't anticipated. The key is remembering that you're still in control of decisions that shape your future. They arrived at Coleman Auto Repair as the dinner crowd was gathering at nearby restaurants, with several vehicles parked outside waiting for Monday morning service appointments. Ava's first instinct was to help with evening procedures, but Kevin suggested that she take time to share the day's news before returning to routine responsibilities. How did the advanced assessment go? He asked as she approached the service bay where he was organizing tools for the next day's work. Colonel Bailey said, I have potential for advanced military training programs. She's submitting a positive evaluation to Regional Command. Regional Command, Donna repeated, emerging from the office with an expression that mixed pride with concern about implications that seemed to grow more significant each week. That sounds like it involves commitments we might not understand fully. Before Ava could respond, the conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Sanders, who had walked over from her house to check on the family and share news that she had gathered during her afternoon rounds through Stonebridge social networks. I heard from Pastor Edwards' wife that there's been military personnel asking questions about Aka's training progress, she announced without preamble. Apparently, word has reached some pretty important officials at Fort Red Hawk. The knowledge that her abilities were generating official military interest felt both validating and intimidating. The progression from community program participant to subject of military evaluation had occurred faster than anyone had anticipated, creating opportunities and expectations that challenged the family's understanding of what was possible for someone from their background. What does that mean exactly? Kevin asked, setting down his wrench to give the conversation his full attention. It means Ava's demonstrated abilities that military professionals consider worth developing, Mrs. Sanders replied. From what I understand, they don't offer advanced training opportunities to many civilian children. This could be quite significant for her future. As the evening settled into the familiar rhythm of family dinner and homework completion, Ava found herself thinking about the choices that lay ahead and the potential consequences for everyone she cared about. The military assessment had exceeded expectations, but success had created new questions about training schedules and commitment levels that could reshape her entire adolescence. Hey, the girl who had learned to be invisible was discovering that genuine talent eventually demanded recognition regardless of how comfortable or uncomfortable that attention might feel. Tomorrow would bring new decisions about training intensity and competitive opportunities. But tonight, she allowed herself to believe that she was ready for whatever challenges her developing abilities might create. The most important test was still ahead, waiting in a future that seemed to grow more significant with each demonstration of her exceptional potential. But for now, she was content to know that she had found something she could excel at, something that rewarded exactly the qualities she had been developing through years of quiet determination and careful observation. Her journey toward confronting General Anthony Burke's arrogance was accelerating, though she had no way of knowing that her next training session would bring her face to face with the military officer, whose dismissive attitude toward civilian capabilities would soon be challenged in ways he never expected. 3 weeks into November, Ava had established a routine that revolved around school, family responsibilities, and twice-weekly training sessions that were transforming her from a promising beginner into something approaching a genuine tactical athlete. Her progress had been so dramatic that Colonel Bailey had begun introducing concepts typically reserved for advanced military personnel, including strategic planning, team leadership exercises, and psychological preparation techniques used by special operations candidates. The transformation wasn't limited to physical skills. The confidence that came from discovering genuine talent had begun affecting other aspects of her life, from classroom participation to her interactions with family members who were still processing the implications of her unexpected abilities. For the first time since elementary school had become a struggle with social dynamics and economic embarrassment, Ava looked forward to something that belonged exclusively to her: advanced tactical scenarios today. Colonel Bailey announced as they arrived at Fort Red Hawk on a crisp Saturday that painted the Colorado landscape in shades of steel and gold. If you can maintain your problem-solving efficiency under these conditions, we'll start discussing entry into some junior military competitions. The prospect of competitive military training had evolved from abstract possibility into concrete planning. Over the past weeks, Colonel Bailey had been researching tournaments and development camps that offered scholarships for promising young athletes. Understanding that Ava's family circumstances required opportunities that didn't demand significant financial investment before demonstrating their potential value. "What kind of competitions?" she asked as they walked toward training areas that had become familiar through intensive practice sessions. Her arms were now strong enough to handle the heavier equipment that advanced tactical training required. Colorado Junior Military Skills Championships in February for starters. Winners qualify for regional competitions, and regional winners advance to nationals. Scholarship opportunities increased significantly at each level, including full military academy appointments for athletes who demonstrate national-level talent. The mention of military academy scholarships caught Eva's attention in ways that shorter-term competitions hadn't. Higher education had always seemed like a luxury that families like hers couldn't afford, something that belonged to a different social class entirely. The possibility that her training abilities might provide access to prestigious institutions felt almost too significant to believe. "How good would I have to be to win something like state championships?" Colonel Bailey finished adjusting equipment settings before answering her expression, suggesting she had been considering exactly that question. "Based on your current rate of improvement, I think you could be competitive at state level within 4 months. But there's a difference between being competitive and being dominant, and dominance is what really opens doors to opportunities that can change your entire life trajectory." They spent the first hour working on tactical decision-making refinements that became crucial under time pressure. Small variations in strategy that were insignificant during practice exercises became major performance factors when external stress increased, requiring a level of mental clarity that tested the limits of human cognitive processing under pressure. The ML-20's Ava approached these challenges with the same methodical focus that characterized her approach to difficult schoolwork, breaking complex requirements into manageable components and executing each step with careful attention to detail. Her first attempt at multi-stage tactical scenarios scattered her performance more than she had become accustomed to, with timing inconsistencies that frustrated her until Colonel Bailey explained that maintaining efficiency as complexity increased was the fundamental challenge separating recreational athletes from serious competitors. "Don't get discouraged by timing variations," she said as they reviewed performance data from electronic monitoring systems. "Look at the consistency of your decision-making instead. See how your strategic choices remain sound even when external pressure increases. That tells us your analytical thinking is excellent, but you're still developing the automation that allows complex skills to function under stress. Strategic thinking turned out to be more art than science, requiring the kind of cognitive flexibility that Ava was still developing. Unlike controlled conditions of basic training where variables were minimal, advanced tactical scenarios demanded constant awareness of changing factors that could invalidate previously sound strategies if not properly adapted to new circumstances. Watch the scenario development between here and the final objective, Colonel Bailey instructed, pointing toward indicators that revealed how environmental conditions would change throughout each exercise. See how the optimal path shifts as new information becomes available? That tells you strategy must remain flexible while execution maintains consistency. Ava studied the scenario patterns with the same intense attention she brought to other precision tasks, gradually learning to interpret the subtle cues that experienced military personnel used to predict tactical developments. The process required a level of cognitive awareness that she had never needed to develop, but she found herself naturally attuned to the kind of detailed analysis that effective strategic thinking demanded. As they progressed through increasingly complex exercises, her performance began improving noticeably as she incorporated strategic flexibility into her tactical routine. The advancement was dramatic enough to attract attention from other military personnel working at adjacent training areas, including several competitive athletes who had been practicing on nearby courses. "Excuse me," said a young woman in military fatigues who introduced herself as Lieutenant Maria Santos. "I couldn't help noticing your performance on the tactical scenarios. Are you training for junior competitions?" Ava looked to Colonel Bailey for guidance about how to respond to questions from military personnel, still uncertain about the social dynamics of military culture and competitive athletics. Her nod indicated that Lieutenant Santos was someone worth talking to. "We're exploring that possibility," quote, Colonel Bailey replied. "Ava's been training for about 2 months and showing remarkable progress in strategic thinking and tactical execution." Lieutenant Santos examined the electronic performance data with the analytical gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating capabilities under demanding conditions. "This is impressive work for someone just starting competitive training. What's your military background?" "Colonel, 22 years Army, currently commanding training operations here at Fort Red Hawk. I volunteer with youth development programs when time permits. I'm stationed with the Colorado National Guard Special Operations Unit about an hour from here. We host an annual junior tactical competition that might interest you. It's designed to identify young athletes with potential for military academy appointments or specialized training scholarships." The mention of special operations introduced possibilities that Ava hadn't considered. Her knowledge of such units was limited to what she had seen in documentaries, but she understood that they represented paths to military careers based on merit rather than family connections or financial resources. "What would something like that involve?" she asked. "A weekend competition in January with instruction from some of the military's best tactical coaches. Participants compete in various challenges and top performers receive invitations to advanced training programs. No cost to participants, and promising athletes often receive ongoing mentorship that can lead to significant opportunities." Lieutenant Santos handed Colonel Bailey a business card with contact information for the program. "I'd encourage you to apply. Based on what I've observed today, I think Ava would benefit from exposure to national-level competition and instruction." After Lieutenant Santos departed, Ava found herself thinking about the unexpected directions her training development was taking. What had begun as participation in a community youth program was evolving into possibilities that could reshape her entire future. From educational opportunities to career paths she had never imagined accessible to someone from her background. "Are you interested in special operations training?" Colonel Bailey asked as they prepared for the afternoon portion of their session. "I don't know much about it, but if it helps with military academy scholarships, then yes, special operations training programs are among the most demanding in the world. But they also provide opportunities for advancement that conventional programs can't match. If you're serious about developing your abilities to their full potential, specialized instruction could accelerate your progress significantly." They spent the afternoon working on team leadership exercises that required maintaining tactical efficiency while coordinating multiple team members under time pressure. The challenges were mentally and physically demanding, forcing Ava to apply developing skills under conditions that simulated competitive stress while managing responsibilities for other people's performance. She discovered that her natural tendency towards strategic thinking served her well when leadership pressure increased, allowing her to maintain clear decision-making even when external demands multiplied significantly. The ability to coordinate complex operations while preserving individual performance standards was exactly the kind of capability that military mice valued most highly. "Excellent leadership adaptation," Captain Stewart observed as they reviewed her team coordination results. You're maintaining tactical efficiency under conditions that would challenge experienced military personnel. Most people lose strategic clarity dramatically when leadership responsibility increases, but you're actually improving as coordination demands become more complex. As they concluded the day's training and began equipment cleanup according to military standards, Colonel Bailey approached Sergeant Thompson for a conversation that Ava could only partially overhear. She caught fragments about exceptional leadership potential and accelerated development track that suggested her performance had exceeded whatever expectations they might have established. Ava, Colonel Bailey said as they prepared to leave, I want to schedule intensive sessions. If you're interested and your parents approve, what you demonstrated today indicates potential that shouldn't be wasted. With consistent training and proper competition exposure, you could develop into something really special. The drive back to Stonebridge gave her time to process the afternoon's revelations about her own capabilities and what they might mean for her family's future. The discovery that she possessed genuine talent for tactical thinking and leadership felt surreal after years of being the responsible child who helped hold her family together without drawing attention to herself or her own potential. How do you feel about what happened today? Pastor Edwards asked as they descended from the mountains toward town, surprised mostly. I didn't expect to be good at leadership activities, but also excited about the competition opportunities they mentioned. What kind of opportunities? Special operations training programs that could lead to military academy appointments. Lieutenant Santos thinks I might be competitive at national level if I continue developing these skills. Pastor Edwards nodded with understanding that suggested he had anticipated such possibilities emerging from her training progress. Those are remarkable opportunities, but remember that they represent significant commitments that could affect your entire future. Sometimes we have to be prepared for success to create challenges we hadn't expected. They arrived at Coleman Auto Repair during the evening shift change, finding Kevin concluding negotiations with a commercial customer whose fleet maintenance contract could provide steady income through the winter months. Ava's first instinct was to help with closing procedures, but Donna suggested that she take time to share the day's developments before returning to routine responsibilities. How did advanced training go today? She asked as Ava approached the office where monthly financial planning was in progress. Colonel Bailey wants to schedule intensive sessions because she thinks I have potential for national-level competition. I also met a special operations officer who invited me to apply for a tactical competition that could lead to military academy opportunities. Military academy, Kevin repeated, looking up from invoices with an expression that reflected both pride and concern about implications he couldn't yet fully understand. That sounds like a pretty serious commitment. It's just a competition to see if I'm good enough for advanced training programs. But Lieutenant Santos said promising participants often receive ongoing mentorship and help with academy applications. Before either parent could respond, the conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Austin, who had been working on a school presentation about military training that had required extensive research into tactical thinking and leadership development. His project had included detailed study of special operations capabilities, giving him knowledge about ECA's training environment that impressed adults with its thoroughness. Did you know that special operations soldiers have to pass tests that most regular soldiers can't even attempt? He announced with enthusiasm that characterized most of his discoveries, and they have special training that teaches them how to lead other soldiers in really difficult situations. Where did you learn all that? Donna asked. Library research and internet videos. Mrs. Crawford helped me find information about military leadership training for my presentation. She said, some of the soldiers are so good at tactical thinking that they can solve problems that other people can't even understand. The mention of tactical problem solving caught Eva's attention in ways that basic training hadn't. Such advanced capabilities seemed to belong to an entirely different category of military service, requiring mental abilities that went far beyond what she had been developing during her civilian training sessions. Do you think I could ever be that good at tactical thinking? She asked Austin, genuinely curious about his opinion. Mrs. Crawford said, the best military leaders spend years learning to think strategically under pressure, but some people have natural abilities that make them learn faster. She thinks you might be one of those people based on what Pastor Edwards told her about your training progress. The endorsement from Austin's teacher, who had been following Ava's development through community conversations and Austin's enthusiastic reports, carried unexpected weight. Mrs. Crawford had taught in Stonebridge for over 15 years, developing reliable instincts about which children possessed unusual capabilities that might flourish under proper guidance and recognition. As they prepared to close the garage and transition to family evening routines, Ava found herself thinking about the progression from her first tentative experiences at the community center to the current reality of military evaluation and national competition possibilities. The transformation felt both gradual and sudden, like growing up in ways that were visible only when comparing distant points rather than day-to-day changes. The girl who had learned to be invisible was beginning to understand that exceptional achievement eventually demanded recognition that could be both opportunity and burden. Tomorrow would bring new questions about intensive training schedules and competitive commitments, but tonight, she allowed herself to believe that she was ready for whatever challenges her developing abilities might create. The most significant test of her capabilities was still ahead, waiting in a future that seemed to grow more promising with each demonstration of her tactical potential. December arrived with an unexpected blizzard that transformed Stonebridge into a winter wonderland, temporarily hiding the town's economic struggles beneath a pristine blanket of snow that made everything look prosperous and well-maintained. Ava stood at the kitchen window of their modest home above the auto shop, watching the flakes accumulate on Highway 285 while mentally preparing for what Colonel Bailey had described as her most challenging training session yet. The Colorado Junior Military Skills Championships application had been submitted 2 weeks earlier, accompanied by documentation of her rapid progress and letters of recommendation from both Colonel Bailey and Sergeant Thompson. The response had arrived yesterday in an official military envelope that had made her hand shake slightly as she opened it, revealing an acceptance letter that praised her exceptional development and invited her to participate in the February competition. "Are you nervous about today?" Donna asked as she prepared the coffee that would sustain them through another slow morning of hoping for customers who might brave the storm for automotive service. "More excited than nervous," Ava replied honestly. "Colonel Bailey says we're going to work on advanced tactical leadership, maybe coordinating multiple team scenarios if conditions permit." The progression to complex leadership challenges had been methodical but aggressive, with each new exercise revealing additional layers of capability that separated recreational athletics from the precision demanded by military and competitive applications. Team coordination represented a threshold where individual skills became foundation for group achievement, requiring capabilities that few civilian athletes ever developed. Kevin emerged from the shop floor carrying a steaming mug and wearing the expression of cautious optimism that had replaced constant worry since Eva's training success had begun attracting positive attention from institutions with resources to help rather than simply evaluate their family circumstances. "I've been thinking about this military competition," he said, settling into the kitchen chair where important family discussions typically occurred. "Are we sure it's the right direction for someone your age? Competitive military training sounds pretty intense." The question reflected concerns that had been growing as Aka's abilities attracted increasingly serious attention from organizations that operated according to principles and expectations unfamiliar to their civilian family. Military culture represented a world where excellence was demanded rather than encouraged, where commitment meant accepting obligations that couldn't be easily abandoned if circumstances changed. Colonel Bailey said the competition is designed to identify potential rather than create immediate obligations. Ava replied, repeating assurances that had been provided to address exactly such parental concerns. "It's evaluation, not recruitment, but evaluation for what happens if they decide you have this potential they're looking for?" Before Ava could respond, the conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Austin, who had been working on a research project that involved building a scale model of Fort Red Hawk using construction materials and military photographs. His investigation had included detailed study of tactical training facilities, giving him knowledge about his sister's training environment that impressed adults with its thoroughness. "Did you know that Fort Red Hawk has courses that test soldiers on leadership skills that most people never even think about?" he announced with the enthusiasm he brought to most discoveries. "And they have special equipment that measures exactly how well people can coordinate teams and make decisions under pressure and everything." "Where did you learn all that?" Donna asked. "Library research and online military training videos. Mrs. Crawford helped me find information about tactical leadership programs for my project. She said some of the officers there are so good they can coordinate dozens of soldiers in situations where everything is changing constantly." The mention of complex coordination caught Eva's attention in ways that individual challenges hadn't. Such advanced leadership seemed to belong to an entirely different category of military capability, requiring skills that went far beyond what she had been developing during her training sessions. "Do you think I could ever coordinate that many people effectively?" she asked Austin, genuinely curious about his assessment. Mrs. Crawford said the best military leaders spend years learning to think about multiple things simultaneously, but some people have natural abilities that make them understand teamwork faster. She thinks she might be one of those people based on what Colonel Bailey told Pastor Edwards about your leadership exercises. The endorsement from Austin's teacher, who had been tracking Eka's progress through community conversations, and Austin's detailed reports carried unexpected significance. Mrs. Crawford had taught leadership principles through classroom management for over 2 decades, developing reliable instincts about which children possessed organizational capabilities that might flourish under proper challenge and guidance. As they prepared to leave for Fort Red Hawk, Ava found herself thinking about the trajectory that had brought her from tentative community center participant to serious consideration for national-level military competition. The transformation felt both inevitable and surprising, like discovering abilities that had always existed, but never found appropriate expression until circumstances aligned properly. The drive to Fort Red Hawk took longer than usual due to snow-covered roads that required careful navigation through mountain passes. Pastor Edwards handled the conditions with steady competence, but the weather added an element of uncertainty to a day that already carried significance beyond routine training sessions. Colonel Bailey mentioned that today's session might include some unexpected elements, he said as they carefully navigated toward the valley where the military base was located. Something about testing your adaptability under changing leadership conditions. What kind of changing conditions? She didn't provide details but emphasized that advanced military leadership requires the ability to perform consistently regardless of circumstances. Personnel changes, equipment variations, environmental factors, real-world operations rarely proceed according to initial plans. They arrived at Fort Red Hawk to find Colonel Bailey working with equipment that Ava didn't recognize, including what appeared to be communication systems more sophisticated than anything she had encountered and coordination displays that looked advanced enough to belong in a command center rather than a training facility. Good morning, Ava. Ready for a significant step up in leadership complexity? Yes, ma'am. What are we working with today? This is a tactical coordination system, which is the military version of equipment used by officers managing multiple teams simultaneously. Significantly more complex than individual exercises you've been training with, but also much more capable of revealing true leadership potential. The coordination system felt substantially different in operation, requiring management of multiple information streams while maintaining strategic oversight of team objectives that could change rapidly based on evolving conditions. The cognitive load was noticeably heavier than what she had become accustomed to, but the fundamental leadership principles transferred smoothly to the more sophisticated platform. Outstanding adaptation, Colonel Bailey observed as she completed her first multi-team coordination exercise. Many officers struggle with the transition to complex leadership platforms, but you're maintaining strategic clarity beautifully. They spent the first hour working at basic coordination levels, which had become routine for her individual training, but felt different with the increased responsibility that multi-team leadership provided. The advanced system revealed subtleties in her decision-making that had been invisible with simpler exercises, requiring refinements that challenged her developing skills in new directions. Now for the unexpected element I mentioned, Colonel Bailey said as they prepared to transition to advanced scenarios today. You'll be coordinating with real military personnel the way officers work in actual operational situations. A group of young soldiers in training fatigues approached their position, introducing themselves as members of the Fort Red Hawk Advanced Training Unit. Their presence immediately changed the atmosphere from civilian instruction to something approaching actual military operation. Though their demeanor remained friendly and encouraging rather than intimidating, we're here to serve as your team members while you practice coordination and leadership skills, explained Staff Sergeant Jennifer Walsh, a veteran instructor whose participation would provide realistic feedback about ACA's leadership capabilities under conditions that simulated military expectations. The knowledge that her performance was being evaluated by actual military personnel added pressure that Ava hadn't experienced during previous training sessions. Every decision would be analyzed not just for tactical effectiveness, but for indicators of leadership potential that might qualify her for advanced programs with implications she didn't fully understand. Don't let the military evaluation aspect change your approach, Colonel Bailey advised. Lead the same way you always do and let your natural abilities demonstrate themselves. Staff Sergeant Walsh positioned herself with monitoring equipment that would allow her to observe and record every aspect of Ava's leadership performance. Her presence was both encouraging and challenging, representing official military assessment of capabilities that Ava was still learning to trust completely. The advanced coordination scenarios pushed her skills to their current limits, requiring perfect execution of leadership fundamentals while managing team members who possessed their own expertise and opinions about optimal strategies. The complexity demanded constant adaptation to changing personnel dynamics and mission requirements that evolved throughout each exercise. Her first multi-team operation scattered her attention more than she preferred, with coordination delays that frustrated her until Staff Sergeant Walsh explained that maintaining any reasonable efficiency while managing experienced personnel under changing conditions demonstrated genuine leadership capability. That's solid coordination for someone with your level of experience, she said as they reviewed performance data from electronic monitoring systems. Most civilian leaders never attempt multi-team operations, and fewer still can maintain strategic clarity under these coordination demands. It doesn't feel efficient to me, Ava replied, genuinely disappointed by performance that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. That attitude is exactly what we look for in potential military leaders, Staff Sergeant Walsh observed. The unwillingness to accept adequate performance when excellence might be achievable through continued development. They spent the remainder of the session working on rapid response exercises that required transitioning between multiple scenarios while maintaining team coordination under time pressure. The challenges were more complex than anything Ava had attempted, forcing her to apply developing leadership skills under conditions that simulated operational stress. Her performance exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. The strategic thinking she had been developing transferred smoothly to multi-team scenarios, allowing her to maintain coordination effectiveness even when external pressure increased significantly. Remarkable stress adaptation, Staff Sergeant Walsh noted as they reviewed her rapid response results. You're maintaining leadership efficiency under conditions that would challenge experienced military officers. As the session concluded and equipment was secured according to military standards that exceeded civilian requirements, Staff Sergeant Walsh approached Colonel Bailey for a conversation that Ava could only partially overhear. She caught fragments about exceptional leadership potential and accelerated development recommendation that suggested her performance had made a strong impression on someone whose opinion carried official weight. Ava, Staff Sergeant Walsh said as they prepared to leave, I'll be submitting a very positive evaluation to my commanding officer. Based on what I observed today, I believe you have genuine potential for advanced military leadership training. The drive back to Stonebridge gave her time to process the session's developments and their implications for her future. The transition from civilian training to military leadership evaluation represented a threshold that felt both exciting and overwhelming, opening possibilities that had seemed unimaginable just months earlier. How do you feel about the military interest in your leadership abilities? Pastor Edwards asked as they carefully navigated snow-covered mountain roads, proud, but also scared about what comes next. Everything keeps getting more serious and more complicated than I expected when this started. That's natural when you're discovering capabilities that create opportunities you hadn't anticipated. The key is remembering that you're still in control of the decisions that shape your future, regardless of how many people want to help you develop your potential. They arrived at Coleman Auto Repair as the lunch crowd was beginning to gather at nearby businesses, with several vehicles parked outside waiting for afternoon service appointments despite the challenging weather conditions. Ava's first instinct was to help with customer service, but Kevin suggested that she take time to share the session's news before returning to routine responsibilities. How did the advanced leadership training go? He asked as she approached the service bay where he was organizing equipment for the next day's repairs. Staff Sergeant Walsh said, I have potential for advanced military leadership programs. She's submitting a positive evaluation to her commanding officer. Commanding officer, Donna repeated, her voice carrying a mixture of pride and concern about implications that seemed to grow more significant with each training milestone. That sounds like it involves levels of commitment we might not be prepared for. Before Ava could respond, the conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Sanders, who had braved the snow to check on the family and share news that she had gathered during her daily round through Stonebridge's social networks. I heard from Mrs. Crawford that there's been high-ranking military personnel discussing Ava's leadership development. She announced without preamble. Apparently, word has reached some pretty important officials throughout the regional military hierarchy. The knowledge that her abilities were generating attention from senior military leadership felt both validating and intimidating. The progression from community youth program participant to subject of high-level military evaluation had occurred faster than anyone had anticipated, creating opportunities and expectations that challenged the family's understanding of what was possible for someone from their background. As the afternoon settled into the familiar rhythm of automotive service and family responsibilities, Ava found herself thinking about the choices that lay ahead and their potential consequences for everyone she cared about. The military competition represented a significant step toward levels of recognition that could reshape her entire future, from educational opportunities to career paths that had seemed impossible just months earlier. But as she helped serve customers and listened to community conversations about her achievements, she began to understand that extraordinary abilities sometimes created obligations that extended beyond personal advancement to include representation of everyone who had believed in her potential when others expressed doubt. January's arrival brought bitter cold to the Colorado Rockies and an official invitation that would change everything about Ava's understanding of her own capabilities. The Fort Red Hawk envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, thick with documents that included detailed schedules, equipment specifications, and liability waivers that made the junior military competition feel more like entering a different world than simply attending an advanced athletics event. Ava studied the materials while helping Donna organize medical billing for Rocky Mountain Regional Hospital, noting requirements that seemed designed to separate serious participants from casual enthusiasts. Physical fitness standards, academic prerequisites, and parental consent forms all emphasized that this competition represented evaluation for genuine military pathways rather than recreational demonstration. "Listen to this," she said, reading from the official documentation. "Participants will be evaluated on tactical leadership under stress conditions, multi-team coordination during rapid scenario changes, and adaptability to unfamiliar personnel and equipment configurations." Multi-team coordination, Kevin repeated, pausing in his inventory management to consider the implications. "That sounds like you'd be responsible for other people's performance, not just your own." The question reflected concerns that had been developing as each training milestone revealed new levels of complexity and responsibility. What had begun as participation in a community youth program was evolving toward professional-level capabilities that demanded dedication and sacrifice typically associated with serious career preparation rather than recreational development. "Colonel Bailey thinks I'm ready for it. We've been working up to complex leadership gradually, and she says my fundamentals are solid enough to handle increased responsibility." Before the family discussion could continue, the conversation was interrupted by an unexpected visitor who would prove instrumental in preparing Ava for what lay ahead. Dr. Jennifer Carter knocked on their front door, carrying a professional portfolio and wearing the focused demeanor that characterized her work as a sports psychologist, but extended to broader performance consulting when circumstances warranted exceptional attention. "Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I wanted to discuss some opportunities that might benefit Ava as she prepares for this military competition." Dr. Carter had been following Ava's leadership development through her professional network, which included consultation work with Olympic athletes and military special operations units. Her background encompassed performance psychology training that had proven valuable when working with young people facing pressure in various high-stakes competitive environments. "What kind of opportunities?" Don asked, gesturing for Dr. Carter to join them at the kitchen table where family planning sessions typically occurred. "Mental preparation techniques that competitive leaders and military officers use to maintain performance under extreme pressure. Based on what I have observed about Keva's personality and demonstrated capabilities, I think she would benefit from specific psychological training before attempting national-level competition." The suggestion caught Ava's attention immediately. Her leadership success had been built on natural strategic thinking, but she had begun to sense that advanced competition would require more sophisticated psychological preparation than simple confidence and breathing control. "What would that involve?" she asked. "Stress inoculation training, decision-making under cognitive overload, and techniques for maintaining clarity when managing multiple teams simultaneously." Military leadership evaluation includes deliberate attempts to disrupt cognitive processing, so developing robust mental preparation becomes crucial for success. Dr. Carter opened her portfolio to reveal materials that looked more like military training manuals than therapeutic resources. The documents covered topics ranging from pre-performance routines to recovery from mistakes under competitive pressure, representing knowledge that typically required expensive consultation fees to access. "I'm offering this assistance because I believe Ava has genuine potential to achieve something significant, and I want to ensure she has every advantage possible when facing military evaluation at this level." The generosity of the offer reflected how Stonebridge's community had begun rallying around Eka's success, understanding that her achievements reflected positively on everyone who had contributed to her development. Local investment had transformed her individual accomplishment into collective commitment that motivated assistance from unexpected sources. Over the following weeks, Dr. Carter worked with Ava twice weekly to develop psychological skills that complemented her tactical leadership training. The sessions revealed that her natural calmness under pressure could be enhanced through specific mental preparation techniques that had been developed for Olympic athletes and military special operations personnel. "The key is creating automatic responses to stress that maintain your strategic thinking regardless of external circumstances," Dr. Carter explained during one particularly intensive session. "When pressure increases, your mind should default to proven decision-making processes rather than allowing confusion to disrupt your leadership effectiveness." Simultaneously, Colonel Bailey had intensified her tactical training to prepare for the coordination requirements that would be tested at the junior competition. The advanced challenges demanded perfect execution of leadership fundamentals, while managing personnel factors that became dominant considerations when working with unfamiliar team members. "Everything you've learned about individual leadership applies to multi-team coordination, but with zero margin for communication errors," she said as they worked through scenario exercises that required calculating team performance across multiple operational zones. Coordination factors that cause minor efficiency losses in simple exercises create complete mission failures in complex operations. The week before the competition, Ava achieved her first successful coordination of 6 team scenarios. managing personnel and resources that would have challenged experienced military officers. The accomplishment represented a quantum leap in capability that surprised even Colonel Bailey, who had been tracking her progress with carefully managed expectations. That's military academy level leadership, she said as they examined results from her latest performance evaluation. I've worked with officers who spent years trying to achieve the coordination effectiveness you're demonstrating after just months of training. The praise felt both validating and intimidating, confirming that her abilities had developed beyond recreational proficiency into something approaching professional capability. The realization brought pride, but also pressure about living up to expectations that seemed to increase with each demonstration of her potential. The night before departing for the competition, Ava found herself unable to sleep despite exhaustion from intensive preparation. The event represented the most significant test of her abilities to date. With evaluators who possess decades of experience identifying genuine talent among enthusiastic amateurs, success could open doors to opportunities that had seemed impossible for someone from her background, while poor performance might reveal that her abilities weren't as exceptional as recent praise suggested. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Austin asked from his bed across their shared room. "I think so, Doctor. Carter says I have the mental preparation tools I need, and Colonel Bailey thinks my tactical skills are solid. What happens if you do really well at the competition?" The question reflected curiosity that extended beyond simple sibling interest. Austin had been following her development with pride that seemed to motivate his own academic improvements, as if her success created possibilities for their entire family to aspire toward achievements that had previously seemed unattainable. Colonel Bailey mentioned advanced training programs and military academy opportunities, but I'm trying not to think too far ahead. Tomorrow is about demonstrating what I can do right now. They departed for the Colorado National Training Center before dawn, with Kevin driving through mountain darkness toward a facility that represented both opportunity and unknown challenges. The complex occupied several thousand acres of high-altitude terrain, its installations designed to simulate environments ranging from desert operations to Arctic survival that required years to master. Security procedures at the facility entrance introduced them to protocols that felt simultaneously impressive and intimidating. Personnel who examined their credentials with professional courtesy but obvious vigilance, creating an atmosphere where civilian assumptions about access and authority definitively no longer applied. Colonel Bailey met them at the Competitor Processing Center, her demeanor combining military bearing with genuine warmth that helped ease the transition from civilian to military competitive environment. She had been following AA's preparation through detailed reports from Dr. Carter and her own training observations, developing expectations that would be tested over the next 2 days. "Welcome to the Colorado Junior Military Skills Championships. Ava, are you ready to discover what you're really capable of when we provide national-level competition and evaluation?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm looking forward to the challenge." "Good attitude. Today, we'll start with individual assessments to establish baseline capabilities, then progress through team coordination exercises that will test every aspect of your leadership development." The competition facilities exceeded anything Ava had experienced during training, with courses that extended beyond visual limits, equipment that measured performance with scientific precision, and evaluation by personnel whose credentials included combat experience and Olympic coaching certifications. The scale and sophistication emphasized that military athletics represented an entirely different level of commitment and capability from civilian sports. Her first evaluation session involved leading teams through scenarios ranging from basic coordination to advanced multi-cognitive operations using military protocols she had never encountered before. The unfamiliar procedures added complexity that would have challenged experienced competitors, but her fundamental leadership skills transferred smoothly to the different platforms and requirements. "Impressive adaptation," observed Master Sergeant Jim Bennett, a veteran evaluator whose assessment would significantly influence decisions about her future development opportunities. "Most civilian competitors require extensive orientation when transitioning to military protocols, but you're maintaining leadership effectiveness across multiple challenge types." The initial evaluation revealed capabilities that exceeded expectations of judges who had reviewed her documentation before the competition began. Her coordination times would have been competitive in military academy competitions, while her decision-making scores demonstrated strategic thinking that typically required years of specialized instruction to develop. "Ava, I want you to meet someone," Colonel Bailey said as they prepared for the advanced evaluation phase. "General Anthony Burke is visiting our facility today, and he's expressed interest in observing our most promising participants." The introduction to General Burke would prove to be the pivotal moment that transformed ACA's competition from routine assessment into something approaching legend. At 57, the general commanded respect through 3 decades of service that included combat deployments and senior leadership positions throughout the military. His presence at the competition reflected high-level interest in youth programs that had produced several military academy graduates and special operations personnel. But General Burke also possessed arrogance that had developed over years of dealing with subordinates who rarely challenged his opinions or questioned his judgments. His attitude towards civilian participants in military programs reflected skepticism about whether anyone without formal military background could achieve genuine excellence in disciplines that he considered exclusively military domains. "Colonel Bailey tells me you're our most promising participant," he said upon meeting Ava, his tone carrying condescension that suggested he was humoring a child rather than evaluating a serious competitor. "What's your experience with real tactical leadership?" "I've been training for about 4 months, sir, working up to 16 coordination with military instruction, 4 months." He repeated with barely concealed amusement. "My officers trained for years before attempting coordination of that complexity and operational conditions." "What makes you think civilian training prepares you for military leadership standards?" The challenge in his voice was unmistakable, reflecting assumptions about military superiority that would soon be tested in ways he never anticipated. Ava recognized the skepticism, but also sensed an opportunity to demonstrate capabilities that might surprise someone whose expectations had been shaped by conventional training timelines. "I guess we'll find out during this afternoon's evaluation, sir." "Indeed, we will. In fact, I'm curious enough about your supposed abilities that I'm willing to make this evaluation more interesting." General Burke paused, studying her with a calculating gaze of someone accustomed to making dramatic gestures that reinforced his authority and demonstrated the gap between military professionals and civilian amateurs. "If you can complete the Special Forces qualifying course, something my best officers consider an extreme challenge, I'll personally ensure you receive full scholarship support for any military academy you choose to attend." The offer hung in the air like a challenge that crossed the line from evaluation into personal stakes that would change everything about Aka's future. The Special Forces course represented a standard that few military personnel ever attempted, requiring capabilities that bordered on the exceptional, even among professional soldiers. "And if I can't complete the course," she asked quietly, "then you'll have learned an important lesson about the difference between civilian recreational training and genuine military capability." What General Burke didn't know was that he was about to encounter a 12-year-old girl whose natural abilities had been developing under guidance from people who understood that talent sometimes emerged from the most unexpected places. The arrogant challenge that he intended as a demonstration of military superiority was about to become the defining moment of both their lives. The stage was set for a confrontation that would capture statewide attention and prove once and for all that extraordinary capabilities could emerge from ordinary circumstances when they were nurtured by people who believed in potential rather than credentials. The silence that followed General Burke's challenge stretched across the Colorado National Training Center like a physical presence, broken only by the distant sound of helicopter rotors echoing from other training areas. Ava felt the weight of dozens of military personnel and civilian observers watching her process an offer that could either transform her future or expose her limitations in the most public way possible. Colonel Bailey stepped forward with an expression that mixed concern with professional obligation. "General, with respect, the Special Forces qualifying course represents extreme capability standards that even our most experienced personnel attempt only under ideal conditions. Perhaps we should consider a more reasonable challenge for evaluation purposes." "Colonel, I'm quite familiar with the capabilities of our personnel," General Burke replied with casual authority of someone accustomed to having his judgments accepted without question. "If this young lady possesses the exceptional abilities that you've described in your reports, then exceptional challenges are entirely appropriate." Master Sergeant Bennett moved closer to Ava, his weathered face reflecting decades of experience evaluating competitor capabilities under pressure. His assessment would carry significant weight in determining whether the general's challenge represented reasonable testing or impossible demands designed to prove civilian inferiority. "Miss Coleman, the Special Forces course requires capabilities that go far beyond what we've evaluated today," he said quietly. "Physical demands become extreme, time pressures eliminate margin for error, and tactical complexity approaches operational levels. Are you certain you want to attempt something that could affect how your abilities are perceived throughout the military community?" The question forced Ava to consider implications that extended beyond simple success or failure. Poor performance on such an advanced course might overshadow her demonstrated competence at more reasonable levels, while success would establish capabilities that few people her age had ever achieved. "What exactly would the course involve?" she asked General Burke directly. "Standard Special Forces obstacle progression measured by electronic timing to ensure accuracy. Witnesses from both military and civilian communities to verify results. Single attempt. No practice runs at operational difficulty. Time frame for the attempt: 1 week from today. That provides adequate preparation while maintaining the integrity of the challenge." Captain Stewart approached the group with obvious concern about the direction the evaluation had taken. His original mission had been routine assessment of a promising young competitor, not facilitating high-stakes demonstrations that could impact careers and reputations throughout the military athletics community. General, perhaps we should discuss the parameters privately before finalizing any formal challenge, he suggested diplomatically. Captain, the parameters are quite clear. Miss Coleman either possesses exceptional capability or she doesn't. 1 week provides sufficient time to determine which reality applies. Ava studied the faces around her, recognizing that the general's challenge had transformed routine competition into something approaching public spectacle. Military personnel seemed divided between curiosity about her abilities and concern about the wisdom of subjecting a 12-year-old to such pressure, while civilian observers appeared excited by the dramatic possibilities. I accept the challenge, she said quietly, her voice carrying conviction that surprised everyone present, including herself. General Burke's eyebrows rose slightly, suggesting he hadn't expected immediate acceptance of what he had intended as an intimidating proposition. Excellent. Colonel Bailey will coordinate the details and ensure proper documentation of results. As the group dispersed to discuss logistics and technical requirements, Ava found herself alone with Colonel Bailey, who had been observing the exchange with growing concern about the pressure being placed on her student. Are you absolutely certain about this decision? She asked. Special Forces courses represent the absolute pinnacle of military athletics. Even Olympic competitors and special operations personnel consider such standards extremely challenging. I know it's difficult, but something about the way General Burke issued the challenge makes me think he doesn't expect me to succeed. Maybe he needs to learn that capabilities can emerge from unexpected places. The week that followed became the most intensive preparation period of Aka's young life. Colonel Bailey had contacted every expert resource available, including retired special operations personnel and competitive athletes who understood the technical requirements of elite military performance. Their collective knowledge revealed that Special Forces standards demanded perfection in areas ranging from tactical execution to psychological resilience that most athletes never mastered. At Special Forces level, physical performance is measured in seconds rather than minutes, explained Captain Jake Sullivan, a former Green Beret who had agreed to assist with specialized preparation. Mental clarity becomes the dominant factor, and maintaining strategic thinking accurately requires experience that typically takes years to develop. The technical challenges were staggering. The Special Forces obstacle course included rope climbs that reached 40 feet, tactical movements under simulated fire, and problem-solving exercises that demanded maintaining cognitive function while experiencing physical exhaustion that approached human limits. Psychological preparation became equally demanding. The mental aspects are what separate competent athletes from exceptional ones. Dr. Carter added during preparation sessions that had been intensified to address the extreme pressure of public demonstration. You'll be performing under observation from military leadership, media representatives, and community members who understand the significance of what you're attempting. Ava approached these preparations with the same methodical focus that had characterized her training development from the beginning. Each technical requirement was broken down into manageable components that could be practiced and refined through repetition. Physical conditioning became an obsession, with hours spent developing the strength and endurance that Special Forces standards demanded. The most challenging aspect proved to be psychological preparation for performing under conditions that simulated combat stress. Special Forces evaluation included deliberate attempts to disrupt concentration through noise, time pressure, and equipment malfunctions that tested mental resilience under extreme circumstances. This is combat simulation equipment, which provides the psychological pressure necessary for Special Forces preparation. Captain Sullivan explained as they worked with specialized training apparatus. Everything about these exercises requires mental toughness that goes beyond physical capability. By Wednesday of the preparation week, Ava had achieved consistent performance on individual course components, but the complete Special Forces progression represented a quantum leap in difficulty. Practice sessions revealed that the accumulated stress of multiple challenges created psychological demands that tested even perfect execution of individual skills. Your technique on separate obstacles is flawless, Colonel Bailey observed after a particularly challenging practice session. The question is whether you can maintain that precision when fatigue and time pressure accumulate across the entire course sequence. Thursday brought unexpected assistance from an unlikely source. Mayor Patricia Green arrived at Fort Red Hawk, accompanied by representatives from Stonebrig's business community, who had been following Aka's progress with increasing interest as her achievements brought positive attention to their struggle in town. We wanted you to know that the entire community is supporting this challenge, she announced. Regardless of the outcome, you've already demonstrated capabilities that make us proud to be from Stonebridge. The community support felt both encouraging and overwhelming, adding collective hopes to individual pressure that was already significant. Ava understood that her performance would be interpreted as reflection on everyone who had contributed to her development, from family and neighbors to instructors and community leaders who had provided resources and encouragement. Friday's final practice session produced results that exceeded everyone's expectations. Working with equipment that had become familiar through intensive training, Ava achieved completion times on course components that would have been respectable for experienced Special Forces personnel. That's better performance than most military athletes achieve during their best training cycles, Captain Sullivan said with obvious amazement. If you can duplicate that efficiency under pressure, you'll accomplish something genuinely extraordinary. Saturday arrived clear and cold with atmospheric conditions that veterans considered ideal for extreme physical performance. Word about the challenge had spread throughout the military and civilian communities, drawing observers that included media representatives, military leadership, and curious civilians who understood they might witness something unprecedented. General Burke arrived early, accompanied by staff members whose presence suggested that the challenge had attracted high-level attention throughout the regional military hierarchy. His demeanor remained confident, reflecting assumptions about civilian capabilities that a week of reported progress hadn't significantly altered. "Miss Coleman, are you prepared to demonstrate these exceptional abilities we've been hearing about?" he asked as final preparations were completed. "Yes, sir, I'm ready." The Special Forces obstacle course had been configured exactly according to military specifications verified by electronic timing systems that eliminated any possibility of measurement error. Weather monitoring equipment confirmed that atmospheric conditions remained stable, while video recording systems positioned throughout the course would allow observers to analyze every aspect of her performance. "Ladies and gentlemen," Colonel Bailey announced to the assembled crowd, "today's challenge represents an extreme test of military capability that few athletes ever attempt. Miss Coleman will have one opportunity to complete the Special Forces qualifying course within established time standards." Ava approached the starting line with equipment that had become extensions of her own capabilities through intensive training. The specialized gear felt substantial but familiar, while the course layout provided clarity that made the distant obstacles appear challenging but achievable despite the extreme standards. As she settled into starting position and began the mental preparation routine that Dr. Carter had helped her develop, Ava felt the familiar calm descending that had characterized her best performances throughout her training. The crowd, the pressure, even General Burke's skeptical presence seemed to fade into background noise as her focus narrowed to the essential elements of elite military performance. "Take your time at the start," Colonel Bailey said quietly. "Trust your training and let your natural abilities guide you through each challenge." Through her initial assessment of the course, the obstacles appeared demanding, but manageable against the Colorado landscape. Environmental indicators suggested favorable conditions, while her mental state felt optimal for attempting something that would either establish her reputation permanently or reveal limitations that had been hidden by less demanding challenges. The moment had arrived for Ava Coleman to prove that extraordinary capabilities could emerge from ordinary circumstances when they were nurtured by people who believed in potential rather than credentials. Everything she had learned, everything she had practiced, and everything she hoped to achieve converged on the next few minutes that would determine whether a 12-year-old girl from Stonebridge possessed abilities that even military professionals considered exceptional. General Burke's challenge was about to receive an answer that would surprise everyone present, including the confident officer who had issued it as demonstration of civilian limitations. The stage was set for a performance that would be remembered long after the observers had returned to their normal responsibilities, and the girl who achieved it had moved on to opportunities that such accomplishment would create. The breath that Ava drew before approaching the Special Forces course starting line felt different from any she had taken during months of training, carrying the weight of community hopes, family dreams, and personal pride that had been building toward this singular moment. Before her stretched the most demanding obstacle course in military athletics, representing either vindication of her abilities or public demonstration of their limits. Around the course perimeter, 47 observers maintained respectful silence that amplified every sound from equipment adjustments to atmospheric conditions. Media representatives positioned cameras to document what they understood might be either remarkable achievement or expensive failure, while military personnel watched with professional interest in capabilities that challenged conventional assumptions about training timelines and civilian potential. He and General Burke stood slightly apart from the main group, his posture radiating confidence that the next several minutes would confirm his skepticism about exceptional civilian capabilities. His challenge had been issued as demonstration of military superiority designed to illustrate the gap between recreational training and genuine elite performance that required years of professional preparation to achieve. Environmental conditions remain optimal, Master Sergeant Bennett reported from his position with monitoring equipment. Temperature steady at 32, wind minimal, atmospheric pressure ideal for maximum performance. Ava absorbed the environmental data while conducting final equipment checks that had become automatic through intensive preparation. Her specialized gear felt perfectly balanced, its weight distributed in ways that promoted efficiency during the extended performance sequence that Special Forces standards required. Advanced timing systems provided precision that would eliminate any possibility of disputed results. Ava, Colonel Bailey said quietly, positioning herself where her voice would reach without disturbing other observers. Remember everything we've practiced about maintaining rhythm and psychological composure. Trust your training and let your natural abilities guide you through each challenge. She nodded, acknowledgement while continuing mental preparation routines that Dr. Carter had refined specifically for high-pressure performance. Visualization techniques helped her imagine successful execution of each obstacle component required for course completion, from initial rope climbs through final tactical scenarios that would test every aspect of her development. As she settled into starting position, Ava became aware of her heartbeat in ways that hadn't occurred during practice sessions. The physiological response to pressure was exactly what Dr. Carter had predicted, requiring conscious application of stress management techniques that transformed nervous energy into focused determination. Course monitor ready, Captain Stewart announced from his position with equipment that would track her progress and confirm completion times. All obstacles verified at Special Forces specifications, timing systems activated. Through her initial assessment of the course layout, Ava began the systematic process of route planning that had been refined through hundreds of practice attempts at various difficulty levels. The 40th rope climb loomed as the opening challenge, requiring upper body strength that she had developed specifically for this moment. When conditions remained stable, she announced, sharing environmental assessment with spotters who would verify her observations. Course appears clear for optimal attempt. Confirmed, Captain Stewart replied after consulting his monitoring equipment. Assessment appears accurate for current conditions. The final moments before course initiation stretched into what felt like suspended time, where every sensation became magnified and every decision carried weight that extended far beyond individual performance. Ava's breathing settled into the rhythm that had become natural during months of training, while her mental focus narrowed to essential elements of elite military athletics. "On your mark," Colonel Bailey called out, indicating readiness for the attempt that would determine whether General Burke's challenge had been wise or premature. The electronic starting signal surprised her with its sharp tone despite extensive preparation. Recovery to begin. The initial rope climb required immediate transition from mental preparation to physical execution that demanded perfect coordination between mind and body under conditions that simulated operational stress. The 40th rope ascent felt different under pressure than it had during practice, requiring more conscious effort to maintain the steady rhythm that prevented fatigue accumulation. Hand-cover-hand progression demanded careful attention to grip placement and breathing coordination that could be disrupted by awareness of observers timing every movement. But as she settled into the climbing pattern that had become automatic through repetition, the familiar sense of control efficiency emerged that characterized her best training performances. Each hand placement felt precisely calibrated while her breathing remained steady despite the significant physical demands of the vertical ascent. "Excellent rope technique," Captain Sullivan called out from his observation position. Maintaining optimal rhythm under pressure, the transition from rope climb to tactical movement sequence required immediate adaptation to different physical and mental demands. Low crawls under simulated wire obstacles tested flexibility and spatial awareness, while electronic timing systems measured efficiency that would be compared against Special Forces standards. Through the tactical section, Ava discovered that the psychological preparation Dr. Carter had provided was proving invaluable. Simulated gunfire and smoke effects created sensory distractions that would have disrupted concentration during her early training, but now felt manageable through techniques that maintained focus on essential performance elements. Outstanding stress tolerance, Master Sergeant Bennett observed as she navigated obstacles while maintaining speed that would challenge experienced military personnel. Psychological composure remains excellent despite environmental pressures. The wall traverse presented the course's most technically demanding challenge, requiring upper body strength combined with problem-solving under time pressure that tested both physical and mental capabilities simultaneously. Handholds were positioned to eliminate obvious solutions, demanding creative route finding while maintaining efficiency standards. Her approach to the wall reflected months of tactical thinking development that had taught her to analyze complex problems quickly and implement solutions under pressure. Each hand placement represented a calculated decision that balanced immediate progress against energy conservation for remaining obstacles. "Remarkable tactical thinking," Colonel Bailey noted as she observed problem-solving efficiency that exceeded expectations. Strategic planning remains clear despite accumulated fatigue and time pressure. The final obstacle sequence combined rope descent with tactical scenario completion that required maintaining cognitive function while experiencing physical exhaustion that approached human limits. Landing platforms were positioned to demand precise control during high-stress conditions. Through the descent phase, Ava felt the accumulated effects of the complete course challenging her preparation in ways that individual obstacle practice couldn't replicate. But the systematic training approach that had characterized her development proved effective, allowing her to maintain technique even as physical demands peaked. Excellent descent control, Captain Stewart announced. Technique remains consistent despite course-long stress accumulation. The tactical scenario conclusion demanded rapid decision-making while completing physical tasks that tested coordination under conditions designed to reveal whether athletes possessed genuine special forces potential. Multiple objectives required prioritization under time constraints that eliminated deliberation. Her performance during the final challenges exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. The strategic thinking she had been developing transferred perfectly to operational scenarios, allowing her to maintain efficiency even when multiple demands competed for attention simultaneously. Course completion confirmed. Master Sergeant Bennett announced, his voice carrying surprise that hadn't been present during any previous communications. Time 14 minutes 37 seconds. That establishes a new junior record for Special Forces course completion. The explosion of reaction from assembled observers created chaos that took several minutes to control. Military personnel who had witnessed thousands of athletic demonstrations expressed amazement at performance they considered remarkable even for experienced special operations candidates, while civilian observers cheered achievement that exceeded their most optimistic expectations. General Burke approached the finish area with an expression that cycled rapidly through disbelief, grudging respect, and something approaching embarrassment at having his assumptions so decisively contradicted. His challenge had been designed to demonstrate civilian limitations, but instead had revealed capabilities that challenged his understanding of what was possible with civilian training methods. Outstanding performance, Miss Coleman, he said, his tone carrying professional acknowledgement despite personal disappointment. That was Special Forces capability at the highest level. Thank you, sir. Does this mean I've met the challenge requirements? You've exceeded them significantly. I'll honor my commitment regarding Military Academy scholarship support, though I suspect your demonstrated abilities will create opportunities beyond what any single institution can provide. As equipment was secured and observers began dispersing to share news of what they had witnessed, Ava found herself surrounded by people whose lives had been affected by her achievement in ways that extended beyond simple entertainment. Military personnel discussed implications for recruiting and training programs, while civilian observers planned celebrations that would bring positive attention to Stonebrig's struggling community. How do you feel about what just happened? Colonel Bailey asked as the immediate excitement began settling into more manageable expressions of congratulation and amazement. Proud but also overwhelmed. I didn't expect the course completion to create this much attention. Special Forces records by 12-year-old civilians tend to generate attention whether the athlete expects it or not. What you accomplished today will be remembered for a very long time. The drive back to Stonebridge felt surreal, as if they were returning from a different world where impossible things happened regularly rather than once in a lifetime. Pastor Edwards handled the mountain roads with careful attention while processing implications of what Eva's success might mean for her future and the community that had supported her development. You understand that everything changes now, he said as they descended toward the valley where their normal life waited. Achievement at this level creates opportunities and obligations that didn't exist before. What kind of obligations? People will expect you to continue developing your abilities, possibly at levels that require commitments beyond what we initially imagined. Militarize, competitive athletic circuits, maybe even professional opportunities that could take you far from Stonebridge. The prospect of leaving the community that had nurtured her abilities felt both exciting and frightening. Higher education and career possibilities that had seemed impossible for someone from her background were becoming accessible, but accessing them might require abandoning the people and places that had shaped her development. They arrived at Coleman Auto Repair to find the parking lot fuller than it had been since the garage's most prosperous days. Word of Kava's achievement had spread through Stonebridge social networks with the speed that significant news traveled in small communities, drawing celebrants who wanted to share in success that reflected positively on everyone who had contributed to her development. There's our champion, Mrs. Sanders announced as Ava entered the garage, generating applause that filled the service bay with warmth that felt more valuable than any formal recognition. The whole town's been waiting to hear how the challenge went. I completed the course, Ava said simply, generating another round of applause that brought tears to her eyes. Kevin emerged from the office wearing an expression of pride that transformed his usual worry lines into something approaching joy. The financial pressures that had dominated family conversations for years seemed temporarily forgotten in celebration of achievement that created possibilities none of them had imagined. "How does it feel to be the girl who broke Special Forces records?" he asked, wrapping her in a hug that conveyed emotions too complex for verbal expression. "Like everything is about to change in ways I'm not sure I understand yet." The girl who had learned to be invisible was discovering that exceptional achievement eventually demanded recognition that could be both blessing and burden. Tomorrow would bring new questions about militarism and competitive commitments. But tonight, she allowed herself to believe that she had proven something important about the power of determination and the value of believing in yourself. When others doubted your potential, 3 days after the Special Forces record that had stunned Colorado's military community and captured regional media attention, Ava woke to discover that her achievement had transformed from local celebration into something approaching national phenomenon. The story had been picked up by wire services and social media networks that recognized the compelling narrative of a 12-year-old girl from rural Colorado who had exceeded elite military standards through natural ability and community support. Her phone had been buzzing constantly with interview requests, scholarship offers, and invitations to military demonstrations from organizations she had never heard of. The attention felt overwhelming for someone who had spent most of her life trying to remain invisible. But she was beginning to understand that exceptional achievement inevitably attracted recognition whether the achiever wanted it or not. "Look at this," Donna said, entering Ava's room with a stack of correspondence that had accumulated since news coverage began. Letters from militarism, athletic organizations, even some television producers who want to feature your story on national programs. The correspondence represented opportunities that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier, but also decisions that could reshape her entire future in ways that felt simultaneously exciting and terrifying. Each invitation carried implications for commitments and obligations that extended far beyond what her family had ever contemplated. "There's also this," Donna continued, handing her an official envelope bearing the Department of Defense insignia. It arrived by special courier this morning. Inside was a formal letter from General Burke himself, written on official military stationery that gave his words weight beyond simple personal communication. The document represented both an apology and an acknowledgement that carried significance throughout the regional military hierarchy. "Miss Coleman," the letter read, "upon reflection of Saturday's demonstration, I find it necessary to acknowledge that my challenge was issued from assumptions that your performance proved entirely incorrect. Your achievement represents military capability at the highest level, accomplished through dedication and natural ability that commands respect, regardless of age or civilian status." The letter continued with details about scholarship opportunities and military academy nominations that reflected genuine institutional interest rather than mere courtesy. General Burke's recommendation would carry significant weight in admission processes that typically favored applicants with extensive military family backgrounds and traditional preparation pathways. He's also requesting permission to feature your achievement in military training materials as an example of exceptional civilian development. Donna read from the second page. "Apparently, your methods are being studied as potential improvements to standard military training protocols." The idea that her training approach might influence military instruction felt surreal for someone who had begun athletics only months earlier as part of a community youth program. But Colonel Bailey had always emphasized that civilian methods could complement military techniques when they were based on sound fundamentals and individual adaptation rather than rigid protocol adherence. Before Ava could fully process the implications of General Burke's letter, their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Pastor Edwards, who had been serving as informal coordinator for the flood of opportunities and requests that had emerged since Saturday's demonstration. "We need to discuss some decisions about your immediate future," he said, settling into the kitchen chair that had become his usual position during family planning sessions. "The attention your achievement has generated is creating opportunities that require responses within specific time frames." He opened a folder containing organized summaries of the most significant offers and invitations that had been received. Militarism, competitive athletics organizations, and educational institutions had all expressed interest in providing resources for Ava's continued development, but accepting any of them would require commitments that could affect her entire adolescence. The most immediate decision involves the National Junior Military Championships in Texas next month. Pastor Edwards explained, 4 separate organizations have offered to sponsor your participation, including equipment, travel, and coaching support. "What would participation involve?" Ava asked. "Competition against the best young military athletes in the country, including many who have been training in specialized programs for years. Success could lead to Olympic development opportunities and full military academy scholarships. But the pressure would be intense. The prospect of competing against athletes with years of specialized training felt both challenging and appropriate. Her Special Forces record had established capabilities that demanded testing against genuine competition rather than simply demonstration under controlled conditions. There's also this opportunity that might interest you, Pastor Edwards continued. Retrieving another document from his folder, the Army Special Operations Command has extended an invitation for summer training camp that could lead to selection for international competition teams. Special Operations Command represented the pinnacle of military athletics, producing Olympic medalists and world champions through training programs that were considered among the most demanding in the sport. Invitation to their facilities indicated recognition at levels that few civilian athletes ever achieved. What would my family need to commit to for opportunities like that? Kevin asked, voicing concerns about financial and logistical requirements that might accompany such prestigious programs. Most of these organizations are offering full support because they recognize Ava's potential competitive and publicity value. Her story of rapid development from community program participant to Special Forces record holder represents exactly the kind of narrative that generates positive attention for military athletics. The conversation was interrupted by an unexpected knock on the garage's front door. Through the glass, they could see a well-dressed woman in her 40s whose professional demeanor suggested business rather than casual visitation. Mrs. Coleman, I'm Nicole Anderson from Elite Athletic Management. I represent several Olympic athletes and world champions in various military disciplines. The introduction to professional sports management added dimensions to Aka's situation that hadn't been previously considered. Professional representation could help navigate the complex landscape of opportunities and obligations. But it also suggested that her abilities were being evaluated for commercial potential beyond simple competitive achievement. I've been following Ava's development since the Special Forces demonstration, and I believe she has genuine potential for international competition and professional endorsement opportunities. With proper management and strategic development, her achievements could create substantial benefits for your family. The mention of substantial benefits caught everyone's attention, though not necessarily for the same reasons. The Coleman family's economic struggles had been the underlying motivation for many of Ava's initial choices, but the possibility that her athletic abilities could generate significant income represented a completely different category of opportunity. What kind of benefits? Kevin asked, emerging from the service bay where he had been listening to the conversation while maintaining plausible deniability about eavesdropping endorsement contracts with equipment manufacturers. Appearance fees for demonstrations and competitions, prize money from tournaments, and potentially television or media opportunities. Young athletes with compelling personal stories can generate substantial income when their careers are managed strategically. As Nicole Anderson outlined possibilities that ranged from local endorsement deals to international competition circuits, Ava found herself thinking about the trajectory that had brought her from desperate participation in a community youth program to serious discussion of professional athletic career possibilities. I need time to think about all this, she said finally. Everything is happening so fast that I'm having trouble understanding what each choice might mean for my future. That's completely understandable, Nicole replied. These are life-changing decisions that shouldn't be made hastily, but I would encourage you to consider that opportunities at this level don't present themselves often, and timing can be crucial for maximizing potential benefits. After Nicole departed with business cards and contact information that represented entry into professional athletics, the Coleman family found themselves facing choices that seemed impossibly complex for people who had been focused on basic survival just months earlier. What do you want to do, Ava? Donna asked. This is ultimately your decision, and will support whatever direction feels right to you. The question forced her to consider priorities that had never needed conscious examination. Her athletic development had been motivated initially by curiosity and family necessity, but success had created possibilities that extended far beyond those original goals. I want to keep improving and see how good I can actually become, she said carefully. But I also don't want to lose connection with the people and places that helped me discover these abilities. Those don't have to be mutually exclusive goals, Pastor Edwards observed. Many successful athletes maintain strong ties to their home communities while pursuing careers that take them around the world. That evening, as Stonebridge settled into its familiar rhythm of porch lights and quiet conversations, Ava walked through the neighborhood where her journey had begun. The houses and streets looked exactly the same as they had before her Special Forces record, but her relationship to the community had been fundamentally altered by achievement that reflected positively on everyone who had contributed to her development. How are you handling all this attention, dear Mrs. Sanders called from her front porch where she had been following news coverage of Ava's success with the pride that characterized the entire community's response to her achievements. It's overwhelming, but also exciting. I keep thinking about how different everything is from when I first started at the community center. Different circumstances, same person underneath. That's what's made this whole journey so remarkable to watch. As Ava continued her walk through neighborhoods that had shaped her childhood, She began to understand that her most important decision wasn't about which opportunities to accept, but about how to remain true to the values and relationships that had made her success possible, while embracing possibilities that could take her far beyond Stonebridge's boundaries. The girl who had learned to be invisible was discovering that genuine achievement created responsibilities that extended beyond personal advancement to include representation of everyone who had believed in her potential when others doubted. Tomorrow would bring new decisions about competition schedules and professional opportunities, but tonight she allowed herself to believe that she could honor both her roots and her aspirations without compromising either. The most challenging phase of her journey was just beginning as opportunities created by her Special Forces record began demanding choices that would determine not just her career trajectory, but her character development as someone entrusted with exceptional abilities that could inspire others facing their own seemingly impossible challenges. Her story was becoming larger than personal achievement, evolving into demonstration that extraordinary capabilities could emerge from ordinary circumstances when they were nurtured by communities that understood the true meaning of potential and the power of believing in dreams that others considered unrealistic. 6 months after the Special Forces record that had transformed a 12-year-old girl from Stonebridge into one of the most talked about young athletes in America, Ava Coleman would face choices that would define not just her individual future, but her legacy as proof that exceptional achievement remained possible for those willing to work for it and fortunate enough to find communities that knew how to nurture hidden talents into extraordinary capabilities. 6 months after the Special Forces record that had transformed a 12-year-old girl from Stonebridge into one of the most celebrated young athletes in America, Ava Coleman stood on the awards platform at the National Junior Military Championships in San Antonio, Texas, wearing a gold medal that represented validation of abilities that had once seemed impossible to imagine. The journey from General Burke's arrogant challenge to national championship had been more demanding than anything she could have anticipated. Training camps with Olympic coaches, competition against athletes with years of specialized instruction, and media attention that had turned her personal story into national inspiration for young people facing their own seemingly insurmountable obstacles. But as she looked out over the audience that included family members, community representatives, and military personnel who had traveled to witness her continued success, Ava understood that her most important victory wasn't the medal around her neck or the scholarship opportunities that achievement had created. It was the knowledge that she had remained true to the values and relationships that had made her accomplishment possible. Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony announcer said this year's National Junior Champion not only demonstrated exceptional military athletic capability, but also exemplified the character and determination that represent the best traditions of American competitive excellence. The applause that greeted this introduction felt different from reactions she had received during her early success. This recognition came from people who understood the technical difficulty of what she had accomplished and the personal dedication required to compete successfully against the nation's most promising young military athletes. In the audience, General Anthony Burke sat with an expression that mixed professional respect with personal humility. His presence at the championships represented more than simple courtesy. It was acknowledgement that his initial skepticism had been based on assumptions that Aka's continued success had thoroughly disproven. 6 months ago, I issued a challenge that I believed would demonstrate the limitations of civilian athletic training, quote, he had told a military leadership conference the previous month. Instead, I learned that exceptional ability can emerge from unexpected sources when it's nurtured by people who understand that potential matters more than credentials. His public acknowledgement of error had become part of military training curriculum used to illustrate the importance of remaining open to possibilities that challenged conventional assumptions about talent development and capability assessment. Near the front of the audience, Kevin and Donna Coleman watched their daughter with expressions that reflected the complex emotions of parents whose child had achieved something that exceeded their most optimistic dreams. The financial pressures that had once dominated family conversations had been replaced by decisions about managing opportunities and maintaining balance between competitive demands and normal adolescent development. I still can't quite believe this is real, Donna whispered to her husband as they watched Ava interact with media representatives and fellow competitors who had become friends rather than simply rivals. She's still the same person underneath, Kevin replied, observing how their daughter handled attention with the same quiet confidence that had characterized her approach to challenges throughout her development. Success hasn't changed her core personality. The transformation in their family circumstances had been remarkable. Endorsement contracts with equipment manufacturers had provided financial security that allowed them to expand Coleman Auto Repair while maintaining its role as community gathering place. But more significantly, Ava's success had brought positive attention to Stonebridge that had attracted new businesses and investment opportunities. The best part, Pastor Edwards observed from his position nearby, is watching how her achievements have inspired other young people in the community to pursue their own hidden talents. The youth program at Sacred Heart Community Center had grown from a handful of participants to waiting lists of children whose parents recognized that extraordinary abilities could be developed through patient instruction and community support. Sergeant Thompson had been promoted to full-time program coordinator using EVA's training methods as foundation for curriculum that emphasized individual potential over standardized approaches. As the ceremony concluded and participants began dispersing to celebrate individual achievements, Ava found herself approached by a group of younger competitors who had been following her story throughout the championships. Miss Coleman said, a 10-year-old girl from California, whose own rapid development had been inspired by Kava's example. My coach says you prove that background doesn't matter if you really work hard and believe in yourself. Your coach is right, but remember that hard work is only part of it. You also need people who support your dreams and help you develop your abilities. The conversation with younger athletes reminded Ava of her own early experiences at the community center when Sergeant Thompson's patient instruction had revealed capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. Her role as inspiration for other young competitors felt both rewarding and sobering. Understanding that her public achievements carried responsibilities beyond personal advancement, later that evening at a celebration dinner attended by family, community representatives, and military personnel who had become friends throughout her journey, Ava reflected on the trajectory that had brought her from struggling auto mechanic's daughter to national champion and role model for young athletes across the country. When I think back to that first day at the community center, she said during brief remarks that tradition required from championship winners, I never imagined that learning about tactical thinking would lead to opportunities like this. But the most important thing I've learned isn't about athletic techniques or competition strategies. She paused, looking around the table at faces that represented everyone who had contributed to her development. From tentative beginner to national champion, I've learned that extraordinary things can happen when communities decide to invest in young people's potential. Even when that potential isn't immediately obvious, my success belongs to everyone who believed in possibilities that others considered unrealistic. The acknowledgement brought tears to several eyes, particularly Mrs. Sanders, who had become something of a celebrity herself as the neighbor who had first encouraged Ava's interest in physical activities. What's next for you? Asked a reporter who had been covering Aka's story as it evolved from local interest to national inspiration. Training for international competition, continuing my education through specialized programs, and making sure that my success creates opportunities for other young people who might have hidden talents waiting to be discovered. The answer reflected decisions that had been made after extensive family discussions and consultation with advisors who understood both competitive athletics and adolescent development. Ava would continue pursuing excellence while maintaining connections to Stonebridge and the community support system that had made her achievements possible. As the evening wound down and participants began preparing for journeys back to their home communities, General Burke approached Ava with a request that would have seemed impossible during their first encounter. Miss Coleman, I wonder if you would consider participating in a military leadership symposium where your development methods could be shared with professional instructors. Your approach to rapid skill acquisition has applications that extend far beyond athletics. I'd be honored, sir, but I'd want Colonel Bailey and Dr. Carter to participate as well. My success was created by team effort, not individual achievement. Of course, their contributions to your development represent innovative approaches that could benefit military training programs throughout the country. The flight back to Colorado carried Ava and her family through skies that seemed brighter than the ones they had traveled under just days earlier. The gold medal in her carry-on bag represented achievement that would open doors to opportunities she was still learning to imagine. But the most satisfying aspect of her success was the knowledge that it had been earned through dedication and community support rather than individual talent alone. Are you ready for what comes next? Kevin asked as they descended toward the airport that served the Colorado Mountain region. I think so. The competition and training will be more demanding, but I've learned that I can handle challenges that seem impossible initially if I approach them with the same careful, methodical preparation that got me this far. The welcome that awaited them at Stonebridge exceeded anything they had anticipated. Main Street had been decorated with banners celebrating Eka's championship, while the community center displayed a permanent exhibit documenting her journey from local youth program participant to national champion. This is incredible, Ava said as they drove through neighborhoods where every porch displayed signs and decorations honoring her achievement. The whole town has been planning this celebration since you qualified for nationals, Mrs. Sanders explained from the front seat of Pastor Edwards' truck. Everyone wanted to show how proud we are of what you've accomplished and what you represent for our community. The celebration that evening filled the community center beyond capacity with overflow crowds gathering in the parking lot to share in recognition of achievement that reflected positively on everyone who had contributed to Eva's development. Speakers ranged from Mayor Green to students from Stonebridge Elementary, whose own aspirations had been elevated by her example. Ava Coleman has proven that extraordinary capabilities can emerge from ordinary circumstances when they are nurtured by people who believe in potential rather than limitations. Pastor Edwards said during remarks that captured the significance of her achievements for the broader community. As the formal celebration concluded and neighbors gradually returned to their homes, Ava found herself alone with her family in the auto shop that had been the foundation of their life together. The familiar surroundings felt both comforting and strange after months of travel and competition in environments far removed from Stonebridge's quiet rhythms. "How does it feel to be home?" Donna asked as they settled into the kitchen where so many important family discussions had occurred. "Like everything has changed and nothing has changed at the same time. I'm still the same person, but the world around me has expanded in ways I'm still trying to understand." Austin, who had been unusually quiet during the evening's festivities, finally spoke up with the directness that characterized most of his observations. "Ava, are you going to keep living here with us, or do all these opportunities mean you have to move away?" The question addressed concerns that had been underlying much of the family's discussions about Ava's future. Advanced training and competition schedules would require significant travel, but the community connections that had made her success possible remained centered in Stonebridge. "I'll always come home," she promised, "no matter how far competition takes me or what opportunities develop. This will always be where I belong." As they prepared to close the shop and return to family routines that had been temporarily disrupted by travel and celebration, Ava reflected on the journey that had brought her from desperate participation in a community youth program to national championship and international opportunities that seemed to multiply with each passing week. The girl who had learned to be invisible had discovered that authentic achievement eventually demanded recognition, but that recognition carried responsibilities to represent everyone who had believed in possibilities that others considered unrealistic. Her Special Forces record had been about more than proving General Burke wrong. It had been about demonstrating that extraordinary capabilities could emerge from ordinary circumstances when they were nurtured by communities that understood the true meaning of potential. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as she prepared for international competition and training programs that would test her abilities against the world's best young military athletes. But tonight, surrounded by family and community that had made her success possible, Ava Coleman allowed herself to believe that she was ready for whatever adventures her exceptional gifts might create. The most important lesson of her journey wasn't about athletic techniques or competition strategies. It was about the power of believing in yourself when others doubted your potential, and the importance of remaining connected to the people and values that shaped your character even as success created opportunities to explore worlds far beyond your original circumstances. Her story had become larger than personal achievement, evolving into demonstration that America's promise of opportunity remained accessible to those willing to work for it and fortunate enough to find communities that understood how to nurture hidden talents into extraordinary capabilities. The 12-year-old girl who had accepted an impossible challenge from an arrogant general had become a national champion and inspiration for young people across the country. But she was still Ava Coleman from Stonebridge, Colorado, where extraordinary things could happen when ordinary people decided to believe in the power of potential over the limitations of circumstance. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoy this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.